In 1988, at the age of 90, Enzo Ferrari left our world for the next. His final request, to give the culmination of his life's work to the only driver who haunted him. Her name was Stephanie McClaire, and her very existence is a mystery. Her age unmoving, her life seemingly immortal. McClaire stepped foot in his factory after she was laid to rest in the grave, slaughtered at the hands of one of his cars, and it chilled Enzo to his core. He shunned her, terrified, too scared to look at the shadow of what his company had become in the early 1960s. The monster of Maranello, the killer of drivers. His final request, give the culmination of his life's work to her, and then haunt her as she did him. This is the story of Stephanie McClaire and Enzo's shadow. The F40 was the final car built under Enzo's stewardship, the LM being the ultimate racing form of the supercar. However, built in extremely small numbers, the F40 Competizione was the street-legal yet unlimited version of the LM, built to dominate the battlefield that is auto racing in the hands of privateers for many years to come. A car built for the world's racing mercenaries. Daytona, Spa, Le Mans. It was built for the tracks where legends were born, and often drivers went to die. McClaire could count herself as one of those statistics. Under the cover of darkness, McClaire returned to the track where she lost her life in 1962, but she was not alone. Days leading up to the 24-hour classic, McClaire snuck onto the track that built the legend that was Ferrari. One victory and one fatality at a time. With over 700 horsepower, the F40 Competizione remained the tool of choice for drivers dedicated to the podium in races around the world, even in the face of stiff competition like the McLaren F1. However, Ferrari had not stood still since the death of their leader, and the top-secret Enzo's Shadow program was busy developing the new car. Enzo's Shadow was the top-secret program within Ferrari. The best engineers and the best drivers worked together, dedicated to building a machine that offered the experience of the F40 to anyone, regardless of skill level. This philosophy continues to this day and can be seen in most modern Ferraris. Using technology taken from Formula One, the F50 was born. The F40 was famously a driver's car, requiring a skilled pilot to extract its best. The Competizione took that one step further, becoming a nearly untamable mechanical stallion. McClaire was the ultimate proof of this. Known for bending cars to her will, even she struggled to tame Enzo's final gift. The F50 was the most technologically advanced street car Ferrari had ever built in 1995. The engine was a stressed member of the chassis, built for and eventually used for racing at Le Mans. The traction control system was originally built for F1, but never raced following its banning in 1993. And the carbon fiber body, although slightly heavier than the F40, was 3 times as strong even without its roof. The result was F40 level performance in a car that was much easier to drive. Enzo's Shadow believed the F50 could beat the F40 Competizione, and they set out to prove this while honoring Enzo's wish. Wherever McClaire went with her F40, Enzo's shadow wasn't far behind, haunting her just as Enzo intended. The Enzo's Shadow program car was slightly different from a regular F50 sold to the public. Semi-slick racing tires, larger fuel injectors and more aggressive tuning on the car's onboard computer made the ESF50, as it became known, slightly more adept at chasing down the competizione. Prototype carbon ceramic brakes rounded out the package. And so the stage was set. A civil war hidden in plain sight between Ferrari's past and its future. Caught up in the middle of this battle, if unaware of the fact, was Stephanie McClaire. Statistically speaking, she is the best driver to ever have lived. One of only 2 drivers to achieve the Triple Crown alongside Graham Hill. With over 900 victories across 7 decades of motorsports history, it may seem odd then that McClaire has never won a championship of any sort. That's only one of the mysteries circling the girl who coined the term Racing Mercenary. McClaire was liable to show up to any race in the world she pleased, driving whatever car she felt like. Rich beyond belief, to the point of owning her own island nation, McClaire raced for a very different reason than most. It was instinctual, like the need to breathe for her. No matter who tried to stop her, you couldn't keep her from racing. In 1991, McClaire was banned outright from competing in any race sanctioned by the FIA. They had flirted with the idea for years, given her seemingly immortal, unending life, but finally pulled the trigger and sealed McClaire's fate in professional motorsports around the world. This didn't stop her, though. If she couldn't race on the track, then she would learn to race on the streets. And so, Enzo's Shadow had to adapt too. McClaire took to street racing quickly, as it wasn't far off how she got started. Her first recorded race win was at the 1955 Put-in-Bay Road Races in Ohio. She quickly became a formidable road racer, and eventually, like all young talents, she attracted the eye of Ferrari. In 1961, after a successful campaign in Europe with a Maserati birdcage, McClaire became a reserve driver for the Ferrari factory team. This role was often known as coffin filling, as drivers were tasked with driving hastily repaired cars, in which the original pilot had expired. In this role, she quickly proved her worth. McClaire took the fallen's ruined cars and indeed their very souls to the podium, avenging their deaths and assuring their memories would live on in perpetuity. In 1962, McClaire was given a Ferrari 250 GTO to be entered at the 24 Hours of Le Mans as a privateer entry. The car had once been rebuilt using halves of cars that suffered catastrophic accidents in the front and rear. This joint would be the critical point of failure, when during the race McClaire's car left the track with a tyre failure and went broadside into a tree at top speed. The severed halves of the car tumbled and spun, spraying burning gasoline across the forest that flanked the Mulsanne Strait. By the time the fire was under control, nothing was left of the car or McClaire. Her body was never found, thought to have burned into ashes with the car. Ferrari would go on to win the 1962 running of the 24 Hours of Le Mans in dominant fashion, locking out the podium with their cars. McClaire's death, however, added fire to the flames of anti-motorsport sentiment that was then growing in Europe. The press began to attack Ferrari for sending young men and now a young woman to their untimely demise for sport. They called him the Monster of Maranello and an organizer for competitive mass suicide. Ferrari was no stranger to losing drivers in the pursuit of victory. He mourned for them, paying his respects yearly at Monza, Italy's temple of speed. But he never expected one of his drivers to rise from the dead and suddenly appear in his factory. And yet 1 year later, McClaire was back in Maranello, begging to drive again. At first he thought this girl in front of him was an impersonator. But the more McClaire talked, and the longer he looked into her glowing amber eyes that he once found so striking, the more he realized this was indeed the girl his machine had slaughtered. In a fit of panic, Ferrari banished McClaire from his factory and his life. The two would never speak to each other again. However, if the Grim Reaper couldn't stop Stephanie McClaire from racing, then neither could Enzo Ferrari. McClaire would start her own racing team in 1963, dominating the world of sports car racing until her banning. By 1994, McClaire was spending most of her time in Japan, a country being overtaken by a wave of passion for motorsports. For McClaire, it was heaven on earth. By day, she managed her racing team, helping other talents find their footing in the cutthroat world of racing. By night, or whenever she had the day off, she was satisfying her own hunger to compete, taking part in high-stakes illegal street races all over Japan and indeed the world. For Enzo's shadow, it was a nightmare. Trying to keep up with McClare's globe-trotting, while also maintaining a staff to monitor, repair and tune the ESF-50 in its prototype form, was a Herculean task. Flying the car into the country, setting up a base of operations, fitting the car with cameras and a suite of sensors, and keeping it all out of view of the public or indeed the government of whatever country McClaire was visiting at the time. It was borderline a military operation, and one with massive risks. Enzo's shadow did its best to offset the high costs of the program. However, eventually the bean counters at Ferrari caught on to the massive amount of money being spent. Once the cat was out of the bag and Ferrari learned of Enzo's shadow's illegal racing activities, the group disbanded to protect their jobs in the company, and the ESF-50 was destroyed. In the closing months of 1994, the F-50 was officially debuted to the public. 349 would be built and sold. However, the lowest number you could hope to get was 2. That's because number 1 belonged to the ESF-50 and died with the car. Sadly, the F-50 never realized the potential the program had hoped for. and worse, the things that became necessary to try and conquer McClaire's competizione, owners found particularly annoying. Maintenance costs were high, and although the car was easy to drive at the limit, many drivers lamented about the car's reliance on electronic aids. However, this would not be the end of Enzo's shadow. As a new millennium approached, so did a new car, one that would take the lessons learned from the F50 and be worthy of the name Enzo.